Before we start, I want to say that only 1% of you are subscribed. Please subscribe because when we reach 1,000 subscribers, I will post a special video for you. Adrian Hale adjusted the straps of his backpack as the shuttle descended towards the arid landscape of Zalera. The cabin was abuzz with the crew's final checks, and through the small window, he could see vast stretches of red and orange deserts intersected by occasional patches of verdant green. "First time on Zalera, Dr. Hale?" asked Captain Miro, noticing Adrian's fixed gaze on the window. "Yes, it's quite different from Earth," Adrian replied, turning his attention to the captain. "I'm here to study the ecosystem adjustments for the terraforming project." "Ah, you'll meet all sorts here. Scientists, adventurers, and even a few treasure seekers. Everyone's looking for something on Zalera," the captain chuckled, handing Adrian a digital tablet with local maps and guidelines. The shuttle landed with a gentle thud, stirring a cloud of dust around the landing pad. As the doors opened, a wave of dry heat swept into the cabin. "Welcome to Port Nara," said a voice from the entrance. Adrian looked up to see a tall, slender man extending his hand. "I'm Ivar, your liaison. I'll help you get settled." "Thank you, Ivar. It's good to have a friendly face around," Adrian said, shaking his hand. They walked through the bustling spaceport, where beings from different planets mingled. Merchants hawked exotic goods, and robotic units carried cargo to and from spacecraft. Ivar led Adrian to a hover vehicle parked outside. "As you can see, the port is always alive. It's a hub for trade and information exchange," Ivar explained as they drove away from the throngs of people and into a more secluded area where the research facilities were located. "The main research center is just up ahead," Ivar continued. "You'll find all the resources you need for your work, and I'll introduce you to some of the key personnel." The vehicle stopped in front of a large, dome-shaped building, sleek and reflective against the harsh sunlight. Inside, the temperature was a welcome relief after the heat outside. "This is where you'll be spending most of your time," Ivar said as they entered a large central atrium filled with plants and water features, designed to mimic a more Earth-like environment. Adrian was impressed. "It's beautiful here. An oasis in the desert. Exactly what we were aiming for," Ivar replied. "Let me introduce you to Dr. Alera. She's in charge of the terraforming projects." A woman with sharp features and intense eyes approached them. "Dr. Hale, I've read your papers on xenobiological ecosystems. We're excited to have you here. There's a lot to be done, and your expertise is crucial." "Thank you, Dr. Alera. I'm eager to contribute." "What's the first challenge you're facing here?" Adrian asked, keen to dive into the work. "Water conservation and optimization," Dr. Alera responded promptly. "Zalera's native species are struggling with the changing climate conditions due to our terraforming. We need innovative solutions to preserve their habitats." Adrian nodded, already forming ideas. "I've worked on similar challenges on Mars. Maybe some of those techniques could be adapted here." "That's the spirit," Dr. Alera smiled. "Tomorrow, you'll start with a field visit. See the planet, understand its needs firsthand." "I look forward to it," Adrian said, feeling a surge of anticipation for the challenge ahead. As they wrapped up their introductions, Adrian felt a renewed sense of purpose. Zalera was not just another assignment. It was a chance to make a significant environmental impact, and with the help of his new colleagues, he was ready to start. The next morning, under the glaring Zalaran sun, Adrian and Ivar made their way to one of the largest marketplaces on the planet, located on the outskirts of Port Nara. The marketplace was a vibrant mix of colors and sounds, with stalls selling everything from local produce to alien artifacts. "Markets are the best place to understand a planet's culture," Ivar remarked as they passed a stall draped with luminescent cloths. "Plus, you might find something useful for your fieldwork here." Adrian was fascinated by the diversity. "It's remarkable, all these species and products mingling together. It's like a melting pot of the galaxy." As they moved deeper into the throng of shoppers and vendors, Adrian's attention was caught by a commotion at a nearby stall. A crowd had gathered, and he could hear raised voices. Curious, he moved closer, with Ivar following. In the center of the crowd, a young alien woman stood, visibly distressed. She was cradling two small, bird-like creatures in her arms, and both seemed lethargic, their tiny chests heaving slowly. "What's going on here?" Adrian asked a bystander. "The woman's pets, they're suffering from the heat, and she's out of water," the bystander explained, eyeing the creatures with concern. Without a second thought, Adrian pushed through the crowd, reaching the woman. "Here, use my water," he said, handing over his spare water bottle. The woman looked up, her eyes widening with gratitude. "Thank you, I didn't expect anyone to help," she stammered in the common galactic tongue, her accent thick but understandable. "I'm Adrian, and this is Ivar. We're here to help. These creatures need shade and cool water, fast," Adrian responded, his tone calm and reassuring. Ivar quickly commandeered a nearby vendor's shade umbrella, setting it up to cast a shadow over the small group. The woman carefully poured water into her palm, allowing the delicate creatures to drink. Slowly, their breathing seemed to steady. "My name is Salira. These are Zalaran finchlings. They're sensitive to extreme temperatures," she explained, still cradling the finchlings protectively. "I'm a xenobiologist," Adrian shared, watching the finchlings recover. "Maybe I can help ensure they're better adapted to these conditions in the future." "That would be wonderful," Salira said, her expression softening. "I'm an environmental conservator here. These finchlings are part of a breeding program to restore their population." "Then we share similar goals," Adrian replied with a smile. "I'm here studying the ecosystem for the terraforming project." As the finchlings began to chirp quietly, a sign of their recovery, the crowd around them started to disperse, satisfied that the crisis was averted. "Thank you, Adrian, for your kindness," Salira said, her voice filled with relief. "It was the right thing to do," Adrian responded humbly. "Perhaps you could show me around your conservation work? I'd like to understand more about Zalara's native species." "I'd appreciate that," Salira nodded. "And maybe I can assist with your project as well. It's all connected, after all." As they exchanged contact information, Ivar chimed in, "Looks like this was a fortuitous meeting for everyone." Adrian agreed, feeling a sense of accomplishment and connection. Indeed, it's the unexpected encounters that often lead to the most fruitful collaborations. With plans to meet again, they parted ways, leaving the marketplace with a sense of purpose and a new ally in their respective endeavors to protect and understand the vibrant life of Zalara. A few days later, Adrian received a message from Salira inviting him to visit her conservation site on the outskirts of the biologically diverse Tauran Forest, a crucial habitat on Zalara. Eager to learn more about the local ecosystem and strengthen their budding collaboration, Adrian accepted her invitation. Early the next morning, Adrian met with Ivar at the research facility. "Ready for a field trip?" Adrian greeted him with a grin. "Absolutely," Ivar replied, grabbing a digital map and some field equipment. "It's always good to get out of the lab." They drove through undulating landscapes, where the red sands of the desert gradually gave way to the lush greens of Tauran Forest. Upon arrival, they were greeted by Salira, who looked pleased to see them. "Welcome to my little part of Zalara," Salira said, spreading her arms wide as if to embrace the forest itself. "This area is critical for many native species, not just the finchlings." She led them down a narrow path that wound its way through towering flora. "These plants are all native, each one adapted in unique ways to Zalara's harsh conditions," she explained. Adrian was fascinated, taking notes and occasionally collecting small samples with Salira's guidance. "This is incredible," he remarked. "The adaptability of life forms never ceases to amaze me." Salira smiled at his enthusiasm. "It's my life's work to preserve these ecosystems. Each species here has a role in the ecological balance." As they walked, Ivar observed the interactions between the various plants and animal life. "There's a lot we can learn here for the terraforming project. These adaptations might help us introduce more resilient plant species in other areas." "Exactly," Salira agreed. "And maybe some genetic insights for drought resistance. I've been working on that with the finchlings and other fauna." The trio set up a temporary field station under the shade of a large, canopy-like tree. Adrian pulled out some environmental monitoring tools. "Let's collect some data on air quality and soil composition. It might give us more clues on how to proceed with our adjustments." "Good idea," Salira said, assisting him with the setup. The afternoon was spent in rigorous scientific activity, with each finding joy in the shared pursuit of knowledge. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, they packed up their equipment. Salira invited Adrian and Ivar to her home for a homemade meal, an offer they gladly accepted. At her home, a cozy structure built with sustainable materials, Salira prepared a traditional Zalaran meal. Over dinner, the conversation flowed from scientific discussions to personal stories, deepening their bond. Adrian shared his experiences from other planets. Each place has its challenges, but Zalara has a certain rugged beauty that's compelling. Salira laughed. It grows on you. But it's the community here, people like you, who make the hard work worthwhile. Ivar, who had been listening intently, nodded in agreement. It's the partnerships we form that often lead to the greatest scientific breakthroughs. As the evening wore on, Adrian felt a profound connection not only to Zalara but also to his companions. I think our projects could really benefit from ongoing collaboration. What do you both say to forming a more formal partnership? I think that's an excellent idea, Salira responded warmly. Together, we can make a significant impact. Ivar raised his glass in a toast to new friendships and fruitful collaborations. As they clinked glasses, the stars began to twinkle above, mirroring the sparks of possibility and hope for their shared future endeavors on Zalara. The evening ended with plans for their next meeting, each person excited about the journey ahead. The next morning dawned clear and bright, promising perfect conditions for Adrian and Ivar's planned expedition into the deeper regions of Zalara's wilderness. Accompanied by Salira, who had become an indispensable guide and collaborator, they prepared for a day dedicated to exploring and understanding the unique flora and fauna of the planet. Today, we're heading towards the Crystal Caves, Salira announced as they loaded their equipment into the hover vehicle. It's a bit of a trek, but you'll see some of the most spectacular natural formations on Zalara. Adrian was eager, his camera at the ready. I've heard about these caves. They contain bioluminescent algae, right? Exactly, Salira confirmed. The light patterns are unlike anything else. They're also a good indicator of the environmental health of the area. The journey took them across rugged terrain, each kilometer revealing new vistas and landscapes that were starkly beautiful in their austerity. Upon arriving at the caves, the trio geared up with headlamps and environmental sensors and entered the cavernous opening. Inside, the walls sparkled with natural light, reflecting off the moist surfaces covered in glowing algae. Adrian was mesmerized. This is incredible. The way the light plays off the walls. It's like another world down here. Ivar, busy setting up a sensor, nodded in agreement. These readings will be invaluable for our terraforming metrics. The humidity and light levels are especially unique. They ventured deeper into the caves, taking samples and recording data. At one point, Salira stopped by a small pond that was particularly bright with bioluminescence. This pond is a vital ecosystem all its own. The algae here are a primary food source for some of the nocturnal species. Adrian took samples of the water, pondering. Could we replicate this bioluminescence for other applications? Maybe in other parts of the terraforming project to help with nighttime visibility without electricity? That's an intriguing idea, Ivar mused, examining the algae through a portable microscope. It's sustainable and energy efficient. Could really help in reducing our carbon footprint on new colonies. As the day progressed, the trio discussed various applications for their findings, their conversation filled with technical details and creative possibilities. They were not just colleagues but had become a team, each bringing their own expertise and vision to the project. When they emerged from the caves, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the landscape. They packed up their gear and made their way back to the vehicle. On the drive back, Adrian looked thoughtful. Today was a good reminder of why we do what we do. It's not just about the science or the data. It's about understanding these environments and finding ways to coexist with them. Salira smiled, driving with ease over the familiar terrain. Exactly. It's about respect. We learn from Zalara, and hopefully, we give back just as much. Ivar, reviewing the day's data on a tablet, added, and it's about the connections we make. Not just between species or ecosystems, but between us, the people who work on these projects. We're all connected by our mission here. As they arrived back at their base, the stars were beginning to appear in the night sky, each one a silent witness to the day's explorations and discoveries. They said their goodbyes, each feeling a sense of accomplishment and anticipation for the next adventure on Zalera. Adrian headed to his quarters, feeling energized by the day's work and the potential for their ongoing projects. He knew that the journey ahead would be challenging, but with allies like Ivar and Salira, he was confident they could make a difference. After a series of productive field trips, Adrian and Salira found themselves seated at a small outdoor cafe in Port Nara, enjoying the cooler evening air. Ivar had excused himself for the evening, citing some lab work that needed his attention, leaving Adrian and Salira to discuss their progress and findings in a more relaxed setting. The data from the crystal caves is fascinating, Adrian began, scrolling through charts on his tablet. But I'm equally impressed by how interconnected everything on Zalera is. It's a complex web. Salira nodded, taking a sip of her drink. It's like that with most ecosystems, but Zalera's is particularly delicate. That's why our conservation efforts are so critical. We're not just preserving the planet for its current inhabitants, but also for future generations. Adrian looked up, struck by her passion. You really care about this place, don't you? It's my home, Salira replied simply. But more than that, it's a part of who I am. I believe that if we take care of our planet, it takes care of us in return. Their conversation drifted from scientific to personal. Adrian shared stories of his childhood on Earth, his fascination with biology that led him to a career as a xenobiologist. Salira listened intently, her eyes reflecting the soft light of the cafe. And what about you? Adrian asked. What are you to conservation? Salira smiled, a soft laugh escaping her. I think it was the finchlings, actually. I raised a pair when I was a child. They were so vulnerable, so dependent on the right conditions to thrive. It made me realize how much of an impact I could have. Their meals arrived, but the conversation didn't pause. They discussed everything from their favorite planets to visit, to the philosophy of space exploration and its ethical implications. As the evening wore on, the cafe emptied, leaving them in a quiet bubble. Adrian became aware of how comfortable he felt around Salira, a rarity since he spent so much of his life moving from one research project to another. I usually don't connect with people this easily, he confessed. There's a first time for everything. Salira teased gently, then grew serious. I feel the same, Adrian. There's something about shared goals and passions that brings people together. A pause settled between them, filled with unspoken questions and possibilities. Finally, Adrian reached across the table, his hand hesitating in mid-air. May I? Salira met his gaze, then nodded, placing her hand in his. Adrian's touch was gentle, exploring the connection they both felt burgeoning. Being here with you, it's made me rethink a lot of things, Adrian admitted. About what I want my work to represent, and who I want in my life. Salira squeezed his hand, her voice soft. Let's take it one step at a time. They continued talking late into the night, their conversation dipping into less explored territories of their lives and dreams. When it was time to leave, Adrian felt a reluctance to end the evening. Can I walk you home? He asked, as they stood from the table. I'd like that, Salira replied, her smile lighting up her face. As they walked through the quiet streets of Port Nara, the stars above them seemed to shine brighter, reflecting the new bond forming between them. By the time they reached her door, the night felt enchanted. Thank you for tonight, Salira said, standing at her doorstep. Thank you for opening up to me, Adrian responded. I look forward to many more nights like this. With a final squeeze of hands, they said goodnight, each stepping away with the knowledge that something significant had begun to blossom between them. As the Zalaran sun rose, casting a stark light over the landscape, a palpable tension filled the air at the research center. Adrian arrived early, finding Ivar already deeply engaged with the latest climate data streaming in from various sectors of the planet. Morning, Adrian, Ivar called out, not taking his eyes off the screen. Looks like we're heading into a rough patch. The drought sensors are off the charts across most of the southern regions. Adrian leaned over to look at the data. This could be devastating for the local ecosystems. Have you alerted Salira? Just sent her the data now, Eva replied, tapping on his communicator. She's on her way here. Minutes later, Salira arrived, her face set with concern. I saw the reports. This drought could threaten everything we've been working on, especially the breeding grounds of the finchlings. We need to act fast, Adrian stated. Let's brainstorm some immediate steps we can take to mitigate the effects. Maybe there's a way to enhance the moisture retention of the soil or deploy emergency water reserves. Ivar nodded, pulling up a map on a large screen. Here's the most affected area. If we can set up solar-powered desalination units along the coast, we might be able to pipe water inland. That's a good start, Salira agreed, studying the map. We can also distribute synthetic shade covers to protect the most vulnerable plant species. It'll buy us some time to figure out a long-term solution. The trio spent the morning devising a plan, coordinating with other scientists and conservationists across Salera. Adrian appreciated the seamless collaboration, each member of the team bringing their expertise to the table without hesitation. In the afternoon, they ventured out to the affected areas to implement their emergency measures. The landscape was harsh, the soil cracked and dry. As they worked to install the first desalination unit, Adrian couldn't help but feel a surge of urgency. Seeing the planet like this, it's a stark reminder of the challenges we face, Adrian said as he assisted Ivar with the technical setup. Ivar wiped his brow, looking out over the arid expanse. It's tough, but I believe in what we're doing. Every bit helps. As they moved on to deploying shade covers, Salira coordinated with local workers, her command calm yet assertive. Make sure those covers are secure, she instructed. They need to withstand strong winds. The work was grueling, but as the sun began to set, they had managed to set up several units and covers across key areas. Exhausted yet satisfied with their day's labor, they returned to the base to regroup and plan their next steps. Back at the command center, Adrian checked the new data coming in. The units are functioning within expected parameters. We should see some improvement in humidity levels soon. That's good news, Salira said, her shoulders relaxing slightly. But we're not out of the woods yet. Let's keep monitoring the situation closely. Ivar chimed in, agreed. And maybe we can use this as a case study to develop better drought response strategies in the future. Their conversation continued into the evening, each contributing ideas and refining their strategy. The challenge was daunting, but Adrian felt a profound connection to his colleagues and their shared commitment to preserving Zalera. As they parted ways for the night, Adrian felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was uncertain, but together, they were making a difference. This project was more than just a job. It was a vital mission, and he was proud to be a part of it. The emergency measures seemed to have bought Zalera some time, but the drought continued unabated. The data was disheartening, and the atmosphere among the team was one of tired determination. Adrian and Salira spent a quiet evening at the research center, poring over the latest environmental reports. It's been a month, and there's still no sign of rain, Salira said, her voice heavy with fatigue. She sat next to Adrian, who was reviewing satellite images on a large screen. Adrian nodded, feeling the weight of their task. We're doing everything we can, but nature has its own pace. At least the measures we implemented are helping. Salira sighed and leaned back in her chair, turning to face Adrian. Do you ever think about what keeps you going in moments like this? All the time, Adrian confessed. Sometimes it's the science, the curiosity, but more often, it's the people I meet along the way. People like you. Salira smiled, a tired yet genuine smile. That means a lot. You've been a rock throughout this. They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in thought. The lab was quiet, the usual hum of activity subdued by the late hour. Salira, Adrian started, then hesitated. He turned his chair to face her directly. These past weeks, working with you, feeling the passion you bring to your work, it's inspired me. I've come to care about more than just the project. Salira's expression softened, her eyes meeting his. I feel the same, Adrian. I wasn't expecting to find someone who understands me so well. Encouraged, Adrian reached out and took her hand. I'm glad to hear that because I've been thinking about us, about this connection we have. Salira squeezed his hand, a gesture full of warmth. It's been on my mind too. We've been through so much together. It feels like we're more than just colleagues. Adrian nodded, feeling a rush of relief and excitement. Exactly. And I was wondering if maybe you'd like to explore what this could be. Beyond the project, beyond Zalera. I would like that, Salira replied, her voice a whisper. Adrian stood up, pulling Salira gently to her feet. They moved closer, caught in a moment of mutual realization. Adrian hesitated, then leaned in, and they kissed. A soft, tentative kiss that spoke of new beginnings and mutual respect. As they parted, Adrian smiled. I think we're going to need all the support we can get, with the drought and everything else. But together, I think we can handle it. Salira nodded, her face aglow with a mix of hope and affection. Together sounds perfect. They spent the rest of the evening making plans, not just for the drought relief, but for themselves. They discussed potential strategies for when the dry season would eventually end, and how they could integrate their efforts more deeply, both professionally and personally. When it was time to leave, Adrian used his last water ration to fill a small, makeshift bird bath outside Salira's quarters, recalling the moment that brought them together. With the alien girl's pets dying of thirst, only the human gave his last water to save them, he said, recounting the day they met. Salira laughed, touched by the memory. You really have a way of making an impact, Adrian. As they said goodnight, they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they faced them as a team. Not just in their work, but in life. Adrian walked back to his quarters under the starry Zalaran sky, feeling more at home than he ever had. The long-awaited rain finally arrived on Zalera, washing over the parched land with the promise of renewal. As the first raindrops fell, Adrian stood outside with Salira and Ivar, letting the cool water splash onto their faces. It's finally here, Adrian said, a wide grin spreading across his face as he watched the downpour bring life back to the withered plants around their facility. I was starting to forget what rain felt like, Ivar joked, tilting his head back to catch the drops on his tongue. Salira laughed, her relief palpable. This rain is just the beginning. With the water levels stabilizing, we can start the next phase of reforestation sooner than planned. Back inside the command center, the trio gathered around the main console, where the latest environmental data flickered on the screen. Adrian pointed at the rising moisture levels. Look at that. The soil moisture has increased significantly. This should help kickstart the recovery of the native flora. Ivar nodded, pulling up a new set of data. And the water reserves are filling up faster than anticipated. We might even have enough surplus to expand the habitat zones. That's excellent news, Salira added, her eyes scanning the environmental models. With the expanded zones, we can reintroduce more native species from our conservation programs. The discussion turned to the future, each contribution building on the last, their teamwork seamless and enthusiastic. Adrian presented a new proposal. With the habitat zones expanding, I think it's time we consider establishing permanent research outposts in those areas. It would give us a continuous presence and allow for ongoing studies. Ivar was quick to agree. I'll draft a proposal for the logistics. We'll need sustainable energy solutions for the outposts, maybe solar or wind, given Zalera's climate. Salira, meanwhile, was already looking ahead. And I'll coordinate with the local conservation teams. It's crucial that we keep the community involved and informed every step of the way. As they set their plans into motion, the sense of a fresh start was undeniable. The rain seemed to have washed away the old uncertainties, leaving room for new growth and possibilities. Later, Adrian and Salira took a walk through the revitalized landscape around the research center. The air was fresh, filled with the sense of wet earth and new growth. Adrian took a deep breath, feeling content. Salira, do you think we're making a difference? He asked, watching a pair of finchlings flutter in a newly flourishing bush. Salira smiled, squeezing his hand. I know we are. Just look around. We're not just observers here. We're part of the ecosystem. As they walked back, Adrian reflected on his journey on Zalera. What had started as a simple research trip had grown into something much deeper, a commitment to a planet and its people, and a partnership that he valued deeply. I'm thinking of extending my stay on Zalera, Adrian confessed as they neared the research center. There's still so much to do, and honestly, I can't imagine being anywhere else right now. Solyra stopped and turned to him, her expression serious but her eyes shining. I was hoping you'd say that. There's no one else I'd rather have by my side in this. Together, they looked out over the land, watching as the evening light faded into twilight. The challenges ahead were many, but they were ready to face them together. With every drop of rain and every new shoot that sprouted from the earth, their hope for Solyra's future grew, just as their own bonds had deepened, rooted in shared purpose and nurtured by the challenges they had overcome.